Hello everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar. We're joined by some experts from PayPlan. We've got Alistair and Anthony, who I will hand over to in a moment. But before we do that, I wanted to apologise for earlier on when we started the webinar at the correct time of 12 o'clock. Unfortunately, we had a power outage. I had a power outage, nothing to do with PayPlan. Obviously, with people working from home at the moment, we have very different situations and circumstances, and I'm afraid that was entirely my fault. So apologies, and thank you very much for the people that are rejoining us. I've also explained to people that are have been able to rejoin us that this webinar will be available as a recorded feature that will be available on Care First Lifestyle site and also on the Care First YouTube channel, should you want to watch it later. So without further ado, I will hand over to Anthony and to Alistair to talk to you about PayPlan. Just before I do that, if anybody does have any questions, everybody is on mute that is watching the presentation. If you have any questions, then in your control panel, you have the ability to write questions. If you'd like to do that, please do so. And I will ask any questions of the people that we've got online at the end. So any questions at all, please feel free to write them and I will ask them at the end of the presentation. So over to you guys, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Carl. Hello to everybody. Thanks for coming along to talk to us about debt. Please do feel free to jump in on the chat if you've got any questions. The brief we've got really is to explain to you about PayPlan, so that if you want to use our services or you want to refer people to our services, you'll know how they work and who we are. I think it's particularly important that we share knowledge about that and refresh that at the moment, because we're expecting over the next 2 years a lot more people to need help with debt services. So it's a good time to think about why people need them, what they're expecting, and how we work. So my name's Alistair Chisholm. I'm the Head of Policy and Partnerships at PayPlan. So I'm responsible for our kind of public affairs work around trying to improve the treatment of people in financial difficulty. So we do quite a lot of work with creditors and with government, sharing evidence about where improvements could be made and working together on those improvements, and also on developing partnerships with people in the employee and third sector. So our partnerships that are not creditor partnerships, really. So what I'm going to do, would you mind moving on to the next slide for me, please, Hans? Thank you very much. And then the first, thank you. So I think one thing that, if you're not familiar with the way that debt advice works, I think one thing that should give you some reassurance about us is that since 2014, there's been much stronger regulation of most financial services in this country, following on from the PPI scandal, the banking crash and so on. And it should give you some comfort to know that we're a fully authorised and regulated provider of free debt advice and free debt solutions by the Financial Conduct Authority. There are still a few loopholes in this regime. I don't know, you might have seen that Paul Lewis, journalist, tweeted the other day, don't Google for debt help, because there's a problem with websites that appear to be one thing but are actually doing something else, and they're maybe not always offering the best advice to people. So I think that the fact that you developed a partnership with somebody that you know gives regulated advice is really important for people that want debt help and to use your services. I mean, at the moment, there's stuff going on with lawyers because there are people that are using our name on Google, or names that appear to be our names. So do be aware about that, and developing strong referrals relationships where you can is one way of protecting people from that. If you could ping on to the next one, please, Ants. So the origin of PayPlan is the recession in 1991-2, and we started out as an organisation that was helping police officers who got into debt. It was a particular issue in 1991 because that was really the first time that there was a very large use of consumer credit, booming consumer credit, followed by a recession in this country. And it was a particular issue for the police because they used to often lose their jobs if they got into financial difficulty because they were seen as targets for people trying to influence them. And so what we developed under the now cheesy sounding name Federated Credit was an offering where we would work with police officers in financial difficulty and negotiate with their creditors, get them into a stable situation so there was no threat to them of anything untoward happening, and that would work with their employer. And so it's very much in our DNA, I suppose, to be working with people through trusted intermediaries, people who are in work and struggling to deal with employers and debts and those kind of things. That's the history of PayPlan. So we remain a family-owned business based in Grantham today. Could I have the next one, please, Ants? So about 2,500 people contact us each week for help with their debt problems. So that gives you some idea of the scale. So we're one of the large providers of debt advice in the UK. We work across all the jurisdictions of the UK, even though there are, particularly in the case of Scotland, quite different approaches. We've got a separate PayPlan Scotland division. Next one, please, Ants. And at the moment, we've got 85,000 people that are making payments towards their debts through us. So some of our clients, we have a very long-term relationship with them where we act as their representative with their creditors, long-term plans. Sometimes we have quite different interventions or a short-term role, depending what they need. One of the things I think that we're known for is tailored individual treatment and good customer service. So we've never had, for example, legal aid funding that used to be given to some organisations that pushed advice down a very technical and legalistic route. And so, although we take those questions seriously, we do a lot of work around recognising how difficult it is for somebody to pick up the phone when they're in a lot of debt, how traumatised people are. People commonly tell us about sleepless nights or much worse, and we work very hard around those questions about being a safe pair of hands and a welcoming, kind service. Next one, please, Ants. Thank you. So the Money Advice Service, that now under the umbrella of the Money and Pension Service, is a statutory body established by Parliament to coordinate debt advice services in the UK, and they recommend us as a free debt advice provider. And if you look on their website, you can see them. We do quite a lot of work with them, and that should be another way you can get some comfort that we give good advice and good support to people. Can I have the next slide, please, Ants? So just to give you an idea of the scale of the operation, so the people that are in our long-term support programs owe £1.7 billion, and that's spread over about 800,000 accounts. Next one, please, Ants. And we distribute about £180 million of repayments to creditors every year on behalf of our clients. Next one, please. That's 63,000 people who are in a debt management plan, which is an informal arrangement in which they agree to repay the whole of their debts, but in affordable instalments using a thing called the Standard Financial Statement, which is an agreed system of setting affordable payments and making sure people have got enough money to live and to keep going. And then there are these other arrangements called IVAs, individual voluntary arrangements, and there are different types for self-employed and for employed people. And that's a system of insolvency and debt relief, where a proposal where the person who owes the money agrees to pay back a proportion of their debts is voted on by the creditors and has to be agreed by the creditors. And that's a much more regulated, structured legal measure. Last one, Ants. And we've got about 500 staff members, mostly based in the UK, some of them based in Portugal, in Lisbon. So that's kind of the numbers, give you some idea of the scale of how we operate. So although we are just something to tell you about our call centres, I think. So although we, I mean, the moment we're in lockdown, we operate out of call centres, they're not at all classic financial services call centres, and there's very much a culture of our advisors taking ownership of the people they're looking after, but also talking amongst themselves. And whenever people visit us, they're very surprised that our call centre is not at all like a banking one. It's much more kind of interactive between the people working there, and that's very, very important. Part of establishing a kind of sympathetic, welcoming culture for clients is that we encourage our staff to work together to build that. Next slide, please, Ants. So basically, our model, there are quite a number of free advice providers out there, all doing something sometimes slightly different and something very constructive in different ways. And our model is basically what we like to call a partnership model or a trusted intermediary model. So one of the problems about debt advice is, one, you don't necessarily know what you're getting until you get into it, and two, it can be extremely difficult for people to pluck up the courage to do it. People really feel they're crossing a line or going through the looking glass or something. So typically, people who come to us for help have been thinking about getting help for a year or 2 years, and often there's long periods of time where they've been having sleepless nights and they're quite stressed. And so one of the ways that we like to work is rather than doing brand building, we do relationship building. So we try and work with people that people in financial difficulty will turn to and build up a relationship so that organisations know that they can trust us to look after the people that turn to them for help. And of course, one of those organisations is Care First, where we've been working with them for years now, providing free debt advice to the people who use their services. To give you some other examples in the employee sector, I've already talked about the police, and actually the armed forces followed on quite quickly because there were similar structural issues about the impact of debt on people's professional life. We answer the telephone for Unison, doing a white labelled service with them. They have a set of quite complicated funds that are available and additional support programs, so we collaborate with them. And we also do a lot of work with John Lewis, who are very and an example of an employer that's very interested in looking after the wider welfare of their staff, and Asda as well. Could we have the next one? A big part of our partnership system is working with the voluntary sector, so with organisations that provide advice but then don't have the infrastructure to provide the debt repayment plans or the kind of legal weight to be able to do IVAs, or will advise people and then refer them on to us, or sometimes we'll be integrated into their advice system and we'll do some telephone bits that support their services. And we work quite closely all the time with people across the advice sector. At the moment, Ants and I, during lockdown, are spending a lot of our time providing training to people in the sector about how to deal with people in vulnerable situations, for example, sharing some of our expertise. Increasingly, housing associations are finding that their tenants are running into financial difficulty, and we're developing some quite really productive relationships with them where they're able, because they know their tenants well, to pass them to us for independent trusted advice, and local authorities, the Money Advice Trust. So that's a very important part of how we see, and we see ourselves as a part of that sector, and working with those people is a big part of what we do. Next one, please, Ants. In terms of numbers of people that ask their customers or people they know to come to us to help, the creditors are by far the largest in terms of the number of people that they encourage to come to us, and we've got some quite well-developed partnerships where we share IT and we share training and regular discussions, advise each other on communications with customers and service users and so on. And we've got particularly good relations, I think, with RBS, Santander and Lloyds, and good relationships too with those other creditors on there. An interesting thing, the bottom of that list there is Cabot, which is a well-known and large debt purchaser. And the way that consumer credit has developed over the last while, banks quite often sell debts to debt purchasers who have become kind of specialists in dealing with debt collection, and actually now PayPlan distributes more payments to debt purchasers than to high street banks, although high street banks are still a large originator of those loans. Next one, please, Ants. And finally, these have become really much more important to us, I would say, in the last 2 years. So we've got quite good relationships with organisations that provide special support to people outside the sectors I've talked about. So PayPlan is now the debt advice partner for Refuge, the large domestic abuse charity, and we've done a lot of work to make sure that they've come and audited our systems and to make sure that we can provide really safe advice that won't alert a perpetrator, and we keep people safe and give them the help that they need. We work with the homicide team at Victim Support. We've been doing a lot of work with GAM Care and developing, and about 3 years ago there was a big jump in people coming into debt because of gambling problems. It started off as young men and has spread to kind of across the population. A lot of work to try and make sure that people can get the services they like, and we've been advocating behind the scenes for people who have got a history of gambling difficulties with creditors to work on fair payment for them, and also some charities that are for specific groups of people. So we've recently been doing collaborations with the firefighters and the civil servants charities. So that is our model, really, is that what we would like. And I would like to be able to work with anybody in this room to make sure they understand us as well as they can, so that we can work with you to build trust with people in debt and try and break down the fear and the barriers that people have and make sure people get the help that they need. Next one, please, Hans. So this is a very interesting bit of work because there's a lot of assumptions, as well as a lot of judgment about debt. There's also a lot of assumptions about why people want debt help and what's going on. And so we did a lot of very in-depth work with people in financial difficulty, and the kind of qualitative and quantitative information that we got from that can be viewed from different perspectives. This is one way that we look at it. And actually the largest group of people from that sample, 37% of people come to debt advice. So they're probably driven to advice because of the behaviours of creditors who are chasing them for payments, but they come to us as a place, a kind of safe harbour for protection and shelter, and they're likely to see being in debt as fairly normal. So maybe not seeing it as something that's going to end very quickly, but wanting to have it well managed, and are content to be in an arrangement where they're making repayments that they can afford and getting on with their lives. So that's something to think about when you're talking about debt. It's easy to focus on all the negatives of being in debt and so on, but actually it's possible to take responsibility for your debts and manage them and get on with your life. And so that's one part of the way that we talk to people. So one of the first things we always ask people is what are you looking for? Why have you come to us today? What's your hopes for the future around your money? Next one, please, Ants. So the next group are the people who are really quite traumatized by the process of being in debt and are uncomfortable the whole time they're in the situation. So they feel an erosion of their personal self-worth and really dislike being in debt and need to have strong communications where they know that we're really on their side and we're helping them get through it as effectively as possible. So there's slightly different ways of talking about it. So one is about debt advice can get you back in control, but the other part of debt advice is about having us as your advocate and on your side. And that partly, we try to live the language. So that's partly why we do kind of advocacy and lobbying on behalf of people in financial difficulty, and we want to pick up the problems that they have and try and get better treatment for them. So managing and coping may at first glance look quite similar, but it feels very different to people in those different groups. And thinking about that helps us have the conversations people really want to have. Next one, Ants. So the third of the four groups that we looked at or kind of tried to group our clients into are people who, rather than having debt advice eroding their sense of self-worth, they really like the fact that they feel back in control again. So they've gone through a period of financial difficulty where they've been in crisis, and now that they're in a settled plan, it makes a big difference to them in terms of how they fit into the world and how they see their future. Not quite the same as managing, because they They don't expect to be they don't see debt as just part of life. It's something that's negative, but it's something that they've got control of. Part of the conversations that we have with people, we have lots of conversations and reviews with people where we're talking about their budget and where they see the future and so on. And as some debts get paid off and things moved around, it's very important for those clients in particular that we're acknowledging their planning, and we're not just parking them in a debt solution for a number of years, but we're always working with them so that our advice system helps their planning. And the next one, please, Ants. And finally, there are some people that I'm going to get out of this. I want to get out of this as quickly as possible, and I'm willing to make big reductions in what I spend in order to get rid of a debt situation. And so those people were quite stressed by being in debt, and are really interested in progress. So those are the people. So we've got a little app that people can have where they can see how their debts are being paid down, and they can give us information if bills go up or something changes. And those people are the people that will be very keenly looking at how their debts are going down and wanting to get through it as quickly as possible, light at the end of the tunnel. And they really want advocacy and people on their side, and they want clear milestones and to know what's going on with their cases. So there's quite a mix of needs there, and that snapshot is taken once people are through the initial crisis and they're into the dealing with their solutions stage. Could you move on to the next one, please, Ants? So the other thing to think about is what it is that drives people into financial difficulty, and again, that really affects what's possible and how much support they need. And so we like to understand that as well as we can in as a respectful way as we can. And as I said, we do see shifts in patterns. So we saw this jump in, for example, people with addictions. There have been some interesting changes that have happened in the way people want to talk about debt during the COVID crisis that we've responded to. So on the one hand, because there's a big external driver of financial problems that's affecting the vast majority of households in this country, in some ways there's a bit less shame around debt, because you know what, we're all in the same boat, or if we're not in the same boat, we're in the same storm. And so we've noticed that people are more direct and happier to get on with quite quickly talking about their debt problems when they get through to us. Those will be a certain cohort of people who, because of their circumstances during COVID, are able to talk clearly about it. There's a lot of people where there's so much uncertainty that we have to deal with advice differently, and help people through perhaps a furlough period, and be ready to support them at different stages, and just be very clear about acknowledging that. We have also, though, had, so we've got 3 teams of people that deal with people in especially vulnerable circumstances, which is quite a lot of people. And the number of people that we think are, the percentage of people who we think are vulnerable that come to us has gone up from about 19% before COVID to about a quarter now. And the staff that support those clients, who do an amazing job during lockdown, I think, report more people saying that they feel suicidal, or people in very extreme situations. So one of the things about the COVID crisis, it's very polarizing. So for some people, they've been pitched into a more traumatic situation. Some people find that in these times, in some ways, it's easier to talk about debt. And what we're expecting, what we're working very hard with the banks and so on, is to get to a situation where when there is a big jump in the demand for debt advice, we're ready for it. So before the government stepped in with some very helpful measures at the start of COVID, the banks were really overwhelmed with calls. One bank told us they could only answer 4% of their calls, and we were getting a lot of calls. As people's payment holidays come to an end, as more and more redundancies come through, we want to be ready with the banks so that they can make good assessments and recommend people when they're ready. And we'd like to be doing the same thing with you. So it might be that you work in organisations where there's redundancies happening. It might be that you're just aware of the general rise in debt issues. The Money Advice and Pension Service have done some modelling, and they're expecting something like a 60% increase in demand for debt, but it not to peak for a year or two. So often there's a lag between the crisis and the debt. And the more that we can do to get people into debt advice early, which in a way is about not being over optimistic, which is a hard thing to ask people to do. So people don't come to us because they put things off, but they put things off because they think things will probably get better, or they hope they will. Actually, you can make things better if you face up to them early and get into debt advice, but it's really difficult. And there are some glimmers of hope in this current environment because more people are willing to talk about debt. It's a really common, normal part of life, and there is an awful lot you can do. We can always be helpful to people in some way. So that's where we see the world now. Next one, please, Ants. And this is my last one. So this is just to explain to you, if we're asking you to trust us and send people to us, I want to explain to you kind of what our business model is and how we work. So we're a free debt advice provider, and most people who come to us need shortish term advice where we might be helping them with one-off issue, a bailiff knocking on the door, a problem with a credit card, a problem with rent or something. And there's lots of different strategies you can do in different places. It's quite complex. Debt advice, like a water debt, is really different from a council tax debt. It's really different from a mortgage debt. And all of that blue area is actually funded by the other areas. So our biggest chunk of income is what we call the fair share model. So where we're distributing payments for our clients, we don't charge them at all. We invoice the creditors for a voluntary contribution, which the regulator encourages them to pay. And that's where most of the money comes from. There are also similar arrangements related with IVAs where clients are, creditors vote on an affordable payment that the client has agreed, and out of that affordable payment, a fee comes to us for managing the IVA, and the payments are distributed to the creditors. So we don't charge clients for that advice, and then there's effectively a cross subsidy for the ones that go into solutions for our broader advice services. That's me.
That's great. Thank you very much, Alistair, for that. I've got a couple of questions that people have asked. If I could give those to you now, and then after that, I'll just give people a very brief summary on how Care First can support people. Before we do that, though, I think something that you mentioned was the way that Care First do work with PayPlan, and I think it would be worthwhile just letting people know how we do that. So if people are to contact Care First, you can access either the emotional services of a counsellor or the practical services of an information advice specialist. And if somebody is talking with one of those information specialists about a debt issue that they might be experiencing, then they can, if you decide that you would like to do that, so therefore with your consent, transfer you onto people like PayPlan to be able to get the support, help and advice that you might need in dealing with the issues of debt that you've contacted with Care First about in the first instance. So it remains completely confidential, and it can actually be done with one call. So if you contact us, we can then make a referral out to PayPlan, and they can make contact, or you can have a conversation with them as part of that initial call. So we've worked with PayPlan for many, many years. We've got a great relationship with you guys. I've read a number of really good testimonials from people that have contacted us with what seems to be an endless amount of debt that really is getting on top of them. And one call to Care First means that we can support out the practical side with PayPlan, and we can sort out the emotional impact on debt that you might have for yourself and for your family with one of our counsellors as well, because I don't think we should underplay the impact that debt can have on somebody and their family and their whole way of being. So the advice from sorry, and Alistair, I was just going to say the advice from this really is that there is always something that can be done.
And the relationship with Care First does really help with engagement. So one of the biggest barriers to debt advice working is where people are very isolated. So quite often people, just the fact of not having anybody you feel or actually can talk to about it makes the problem seem insurmountable. And when people come from organisations that have other support systems in there, it has a noticeably beneficial impact on the advice process and the whole kind of holistic picture. We're not experts in people's emotional well-being, but it's often a big element of the debt advice problem. So it is really very valuable, I think, this kind of working together. I think Ants was ready to talk about a bit more about the kind of client journey through PayPlan, if you want to get him to do that bit.
Yeah, that would be great. If Anthony is right to do that. But before I do that, though, there are a couple of questions that we've got. And what I would say is, if there are people with more questions, please do feel free to write those out in the chat part of the portal that you've got on your screen. Questions that are coming through at the moment are things like, can you get a mortgage on a debt management plan? So that's a question. Another one that's come through is, can you move a debt management plan to another company? So if you're working with a debt management plan at the moment with an organisation who is looking after your debt management plan, can they move from that organisation to you? And I know there are a lot of organisations that aren't charitable, that actually take a percentage of somebody's debt as payment for the debt that they're in. And I would imagine that the question is coming from somebody that might have that in mind, you know, that they're using a debt management organisation, they're paying a percentage of that to them, which is impacting their debt in the first instance. Can they take that and move it to you, or does that not work? So two questions there: the mortgage and of course moving the debt management plan.
They can certainly come to us. So there was an intervention by the regulator a few years ago where a lot of the fee charging companies stopped trading, and we had a program where we called kind of debt rescue scheme, where we took on people who had been customers of those fee charging debt management companies, and we can still do that. So we wouldn't. It's not a case of just kind of lift and move. So we would take you on as a new client and help you close down the old one and negotiate a payment that we were sure that you could afford. We wouldn't want to trust that they'd done the assessment properly. I don't think we'd want to use our own judgment, but because all of that work has been done before, there'll be a lot of information that will make the process much smoother, and it's very common. It's very common, and so you can, and you know, there's nothing to stop you ringing up and having the advice, and until you sign and move the plan, it's not moved. So why not test it out to see if you can get a free one that's better?
Would they not be asking though? Would they not be asking or saying to the customer that you can't do that? You know, you've signed certain terms, certain agreements that mean you're absolutely locked into them. Are you saying that the regulators have changed so that people can do that?
The debt management plan can't be a long-term binding agreement. No, there'll be a cancellation period, and I haven't heard of anybody having that problem for 3 or 4 years now, I think. So I'd be amazed. But if people are worried about that, they can get in touch and we'll look at the small print with them and make sure they're protected. We certainly wouldn't do anything that was going to cause detriment. So opposite of what we saw. So
normally there's a maximum of 30 days notice, and quite often it's shorter than that now. So it might be that you've just got to give between 7 to 28 days notice, depending on the situation and the contract you're in with that particular provider.
Okay, that'll be good for people to hear, because I know if they feel locked into a debt management plan with a paid for provider, you know, that can cause some real kind of anxieties, because you're still engaged with an organisation that's actually paying for a service to relieve a debt.
Absolutely. And quite often they may have stumbled on a fee charger on a website or through a recommendation from a friend or a family member, and it will be, quite often it might be a creditor that prompts that there are free alternatives at some point when you're with them. So it's very common for us to have somebody move from a fee charger into a free solution as an alternative. That's something we have a lot of clients coming to us for that particular purpose.
Okay, that's great and good to hear. The other question, of course, is, can you get a mortgage when you're on a debt management plan?
Go on, Alistair, sorry.
No, go, you go, sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, so there's nothing that will normally specifically say that you can't have a mortgage because of X, Y, and Z perhaps, but what will have an implication is your credit status. And because you will have an impact on your credit status from reducing your payments, that might mean that more favourable interest rates. Certain lenders may offer you different products if you are a higher risk borrower, and that might mean that you can still get a mortgage, but it might mean that you're paying more for it at that moment in time because you are a higher risk to them as a borrower. So it might be that you don't get, you know, a percentage rate that's under 2% like many are at the moment. It might mean that you're paying slightly higher than that to reflect the risk because of your credit status. So we have many people that are getting, that are in a debt management plan, and that might be short term, it might be longer term, and they will come to an end of a mortgage deal and switch, and that's absolutely fine. One, they're fully allowed to, that's not a problem, and two, certainly there's many lenders that will offer you a mortgage, even if you're in an insolvency solution perhaps, so something more more structured, perhaps in the form of insolvency. It just might mean that you're paying slightly more because of it.
Okay.
So I would say talk to an advisor about it. So there's been some news this week about people who are finding it more difficult to get mortgages because they've had payment holiday. So they were told it would have no effect at all. And it's not really true because the lenders can see on your credit report that you have missed payments. And so at the moment, where appetites for risk are really changing, if you want to get a DMP and a mortgage in the same week, pretty difficult. If you mean further down, it depends on how the market evolves, but there's definitely no automatic bar, whereas with things like bankruptcy, sometimes they will say you cannot have a mortgage when you go bankrupt, and we do have people that manage mortgages. If you're in a mortgage lenders quite like debt management plans, because one of the things that we do is prioritize the debts really carefully, and we would always prioritize repaying a mortgage. Don't repay a credit card and put your house at threat. So sometimes it adds a stability and it might help build your reputation with your mortgage lender, but it's very individual.
Okay, that's great. Anthony, I think you were going to talk about the customer journey.
Yeah, absolutely, and what somebody could expect if they were engaging our service, or even if somebody was referring somebody into our service.
Do you have a video, a webcam now, Anthony? Because we're hearing a voice, and at the moment it looks like I'm sat here without my mouth moving. So I don't know.
Absolutely. I normally turn it off because it's the slides I want people to look at rather than me.
Yeah, I can. Okay.
Bear with me. There we go. Can you see my slides still though?
Yes, yeah, and
Good.
we can see you.
Good, that's the main thing. I want people to look at the slides. So in terms of myself, just a quick introduction. My name's Anthony. I'm one of the partnership development managers here. I've been with PayPlan now for 17 years. My job is really to interact with organisations so they know how we work and how they can interact with our services. So I'll just give you a bit of an idea of really the client journey and what people can expect. One of the things that really does change the way that people interact with us is how they first approach us. And that might be that they approach us directly. It might be that they come through our website. It might be that they have our free phone number. There are many ways that people might interact with us, but also it might be that they're referred through. And certainly, as you just said earlier there, certainly if someone's referred into our services, that can often be very engaging and it's a very nice warm handover. We do also get a number of organisations that will refer to us, such as the banking sector, as Alistair said, and that can be slightly different. Quite often it might be that a bank recognises that someone's in financial difficulty, even perhaps before they do themselves. And it might be that that client who has debt isn't ready to make that first step to getting advice at that point in time. So one thing that we certainly make sure we do is we're there to flex around that client. If they want to, first of all, just have a very quick conversation with us, they're not quite ready to make that immediate step into getting full advice, that is not a problem. For us, what we want to make sure is they know that our door is always open and that they can return to us at any stage. So for some people, it might be they call us and they get the full advice and they get a resolution on their problem within one call. For other people, it might be that they need a bit of a slower approach to that. And what we want to make sure is that we're going at their pace. So if they want further time, then they can do that. For us, whatever might happen, the main thing is that the client can come to us whenever they want. So they can come through to our website 24 hours a day. every day of the week. Our phone lines, we open from 8 in the morning until 8 in the evening, Monday to Friday. And then on a Saturday, we're also open 9 till 3. And when a client first approaches us or is first referred through to us, they will speak with our helpline team. And our helpline team are really a triage service to understand why the client might be coming to us for help and to ensure that they get that help as quickly as possible. And quite often there will be a main presenting issue that a client will come to us regarding. And that might be that they are struggling with, maybe it's one particular debt. Maybe they have a bailiff at the door. Maybe there is a risk of their home being taken. And for us, we will want to make sure that we advise fully on that particular situation they call in with. But also, one thing that we want to make sure is that we're looking at the situation in a far more holistic manner and understanding if there's any other debt problems that are in the background. And generally there are. It is very unusual that somebody will have a bailiff at the door or is facing maybe a problem such as repossession on a property, and there aren't other debts in the background that are making that even more difficult. So for us, it's certainly understanding what the root cause is, but also what is that overall debt problem that they're encountering. And then that will then lead nicely into ensuring that we're providing them a full holistic range of advice and solutions that are available to that individual. And that could be very, very different per client that comes to us. For some, it might be just some general advice that they need. What should I do with regards to this particular problem? And that might be something we can clear up for them very, very quickly. For other individuals, it might be that we can discuss a full range of debt solutions that are available, and we can talk them through what those range of solutions are, how they all work, and we can make a tailored recommendation to them as well. And that might be a solution that we can manage for them. So for example, a debt management plan that we've talked about earlier, where someone can make a monthly contribution to their debts through us, and then we negotiate with their creditors for them. For others, it might be that they have a smaller amount of debt and that isn't something that they need. But what we need to make sure is that we're looking at every case individually and uniquely. And then what we want to make sure is that the person that's approaching us knows that they can come to us for ongoing support. If that isn't through a managed solution, then it might be that they are given all the tools in which to contact their creditors and maybe write to them, making offers to them, for example. But we're here for them at any stage if they need to come back and get some extra support. So just making sure that they've got that, that real safe haven to come back to whenever they want to. For anybody that comes to us, there's a range of services that are available depending on their particular situation. And that might be help with managing debts. It could be us giving them the tools to be able to do that directly. We'll make sure that we are giving the right advice and support to clients with vulnerabilities, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But for us, that's incredibly important, because somebody that's in a debt problem, purely through that could lead to them being vulnerable. But also what we need to make sure is that we're supporting them with a solution, with how to best tackle their creditors to make that vulnerability as stable and supported as possible. Giving them advice on priority debts. So Alistair touched on this a bit earlier, in that quite often there might be a range of different debts, and some will have different outcomes depending on what you're doing with them, in terms of if you were to reduce payments. Some might have, we might be able to do that very easily. Others might need further help, so such as managing priority debts. We'll give advice on what those debts are and how they should be tackled in the best way. We specialise as well for assisting self-employed individuals, and that's something that's somewhat of a unique offering through PayPlan. Self-employed assistance with debt is quite limited in the UK, but we actually specialise in that. So even if that's not the client themselves, it might be that they have a partner that also needs some debt help and they're self-employed, we can help. And that could be from a sole trader through to somebody running a partnership, a buy-to-let landlord, right through to someone that's a director of a limited company. And what we do is give tailored advice to ensure that those solutions meet the requirements of their type of business. It might be that they have quite a seasonal income, for example. So it's important that we reflect that in the advice we give. We'll talk them through the range of debt solutions that are available to them in full, provide them with budgeting advice if that's something that they need, and help them to put together a financial statement or a budget, as some would refer to. And that can be very useful as well. Quite often when someone approaches us for debt, they've probably never really laid out their full income and their expenditure listed in that way. And that can be quite empowering to actually understand what their situation is, what they can do to remedy that, and also to understand the scale of the help that might be needed. So we'll help somebody to put that together as well. For some people, it will be income maximization advice that they might need, or ways to minimize their expenditure. And some people that come to us, that might be all that they need. Maybe through a full review that we do with them, we can identify that they are, yes, they have a debt problem. At the moment, they can't continue to manage their monthly payments to those debts. But if they were to maximize their income through maybe benefits they're entitled to, it might be through other means, right through to minimizing expenditure as well. And that could be through, for example, reducing tariffs. It could be through switching utility products. There might be a way to actually mean that they don't need any further advice outside of that. So it's not just about solutions, it's also about preventative measures that can be implemented to balance things back off. And at PayPlan, what we want to do is make sure that we're offering our services in a variety of different ways. One thing that we've really listened hard to over the years that we've been in operation is, how does a client want to engage with us? That is really key, in particular around debt. And if you couple that with maybe a vulnerability, sometimes that can be very hard to pick up a phone and speak to somebody when you have someone there that you're speaking to. Some people want to work in different ways, and that might be through a digital platform. So we offer services over the phone. We are available on live chat, text messaging. We have a full service that's available on our website. 18 months ago, we introduced WhatsApp as a way for clients to get debt help, and that's been incredibly popular. I think more so because it's on a tool, a platform that they're probably already familiar with. They might already use WhatsApp perhaps, and that feels comfortable to them. We also offer full email advice as well. And something that we've just brought in over the last few months has been video conference calls as well. And in particular, because of the lockdown situation, how can we make it accessible for somebody to see who they're getting advice from, and maybe for us to be able to share screens in the same way that we're doing today. So that can be really, really useful as an alternative. So a full range of ways for clients to engage with us. Digital advice is something that we've worked very hard on over the last few years in particular, and it's absolutely showing that that was the right thing to do. So 75% of people who actually approach us for help do so via web and digital means. So absolutely shows that that's something that people are wanting. Not everybody, but a lot of people. We are finding that because we're offering different ways for clients to provide information to us, that's helping more people to engage. So we're seeing more people completing their budget and financial statement online because of that. Interestingly, 60% of those that do reach out to get help in a digital manner do so through their mobile. And again, that's something that we've worked hard with, because I think in this day and age, clients will often want a way that is accessible on the go. It might be they're commuting and they want to do some work on their mobile and get some help there and then during that commute. It might be that somebody wants to stop and start, and that's quite accessible on their mobile. They can do a bit in the morning, do a bit at lunch, do a bit on night time perhaps. And again, it's on a device that maybe they feel comfortable with, and it's very accessible whenever they want it. And then 45% of clients now actually choose to complete their budget online with us. So being able to provide details of their household income and expenditure. So it's certainly been a great investment to be able to support clients further in ways that they want to work with us in, which is really important that we're catering for them and their needs. And why do people say that they like digital? Well, a variety of ways and reasons. Right through to someone saying I was too embarrassed to discuss my debt options over the phone. So some people just like to use it as a bit of a barrier, just to use in a useful way. They feel more comfortable by not speaking to somebody over the phone, and that's absolutely fine. What we also find is that some people will choose to switch between methods of communication. So they may start off talking to us on live chat or WhatsApp or an email, and then they feel comfortable with the person they're speaking to and then decide to move on to perhaps telephone at a later date or a video call perhaps as well. I wanted to complete my information at times convenient to me. We can't be available 24/7, of course. We try to accommodate as many hours as we possibly can. But for some people, they will want help at 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe something's keeping them awake, or perhaps it's just the shift pattern that they work with. And because we offer digital tools that enable somebody to engage for debt help at a time that's convenient for them when they want it. So that's another reason. And also being easier for people to understand and digest information sometimes because it's in a written form. And I know on a personal note, that's absolutely the case for me. I'm very much a visual person. If I can't see it, it doesn't go in. So for me, that's really important. And some of the feedback that we're now receiving because of the video conference calls that we're offering, some of the positive feedback has been very much centered around people that have got a vulnerability perhaps, and that just allows them to look at the information and digest it in a different way perhaps. Maybe we can share things with them on the screen that we're looking at as well. Maybe we've helped somebody to pull their credit report, and instead of us just talking to them about what we're seeing, we can show them as well. And that just means that they're along with the journey as much as we are. Ongoing support is incredibly important, and it said earlier that that will be in a variety of different ways depending on the situation and the advice we've given. But that might be in different ways that we can communicate with the client. If somebody is in a managed solution with us, one thing that we will do on a yearly basis is we will review that solution that they're in with us and ensure that what they are paying is affordable, but also ensure that they are still in the most appropriate solution. Or is there a new solution that's now available that would be far better suited? So ensuring that that review is done on a regular basis with the client. We can help them if they are in a solution with us and they get a legal document, we can help them with that. If their situation was to change, maybe they had an income change or an expenditure change, they can request a review whenever they want as well. And some clients, it might be that they can come out of a solution early, and maybe they have, they come into a lump sum of money and they can make a settlement offer. We offer help in that way as well. So we have a team that will look at getting the best possible debt write-off for somebody if that's a possibility. And we're using lots of different technologies as well to provide support to clients. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So that last image there, PayPlan Plus and our app, I'm going to come back to in a moment. And really for anybody that comes to us, what we're trying to achieve is that we take somebody who is somewhere maybe towards the left-hand side of this slide, back to the right-hand side. What we want to make sure is that somebody's, when there are maybe a lot of creditors that are contacting somebody, all maybe asking for different things, that can be very overwhelming, and the situation can sometimes become very chaotic. And what we're trying to achieve, even if it's just through one simple phone call because they feel that they're empowered to now know what to do with them, or that we've calmed them, what we're trying to do is take away some of that noise, help them to understand what their options are, and really to take them onto a journey that's more comfortable for them. Said that I'll talk a little bit about the application, the app that we offer to clients if they're in a solution with us. So we have we've developed over the last over 10 years now PayPlan Plus, which is a free service that we offer to anybody that's in a solution with us. So for example, if somebody was in a debt management plan, and this allows somebody to track their debt management plan or other solution right through from the minute they enter into that solution to the point where they become debt free. And that's very, very important to make sure that they feel in control of what's happening and to stay along with the journey at all times. It will tell them when their review is due, so that yearly review that we do with them. They can also book an appointment with one of our advisors whenever they wish. They can understand what is happening to the money that they're paying into the plan. So when that's distributed to their creditors, it can tell them how much each of their creditors is receiving. They can communicate with the case officer that's taking care of them, and also get lots of help and support through different fact sheets and advice that's on there as well. And they can also update their details. So if they can go on and have a look to see what their current budget looks like, what the current incomings and outgoings are on the system that we have, and they can update that to reflect a change in situation if that's something they need to do. And a lot of this is about empowerment. We want to make sure that when somebody becomes debt free, they feel like they've been empowered and they've rehabilitated through that. So this is really important for us. And the PayPlan Plus tool is available to anybody on a computer, laptop, mobile phone or tablet. And if they're on mobile phone or tablet, they can download the PayPlan app and they can look at that. That gives them 24/7 access to their plan, and it's live information. So whatever they see is what we can see regarding their creditors. So it's the most up-to-date information they can get. I said earlier that one thing that's very important to us is to support vulnerable clients. And one thing that we do spend a lot of time on is ensuring that all of our advisors are fully trained and supported around how to best accommodate a vulnerable client and to flex around that needs and to understand how they can make that client's life easier. So we have, as Alistair said earlier, dedicated teams within our areas. So debt management plans, for example, we have a team that support vulnerable clients. And what will happen is that they will ensure that they stay with that client to offer all the support that they might need and to make things easier with their plan. And that might be changing the way that we communicate with them, or ensuring that they have a fixed point of contact to make that easier and they've got that familiarity as well. We use different techniques and train our advisors on best ways to converse with clients and to recognize vulnerabilities and to ask the right things at the right times to support. And interestingly, 25% of our clients do disclose that they have a vulnerability. So this is something that will affect many people at different stages of their life or their time with PayPlan. And what we need to make sure is that we're recognizing those vulnerabilities as quickly as we can and supporting with them. 92% of our clients actually talk about their vulnerability openly without us asking anything. And I think that's testament to what we do to try and relax somebody and to make them feel that they can trust what we're doing for them, and that they feel they can come forward and talk to us about something that would be very difficult to talk about in many instances. So we try to break down those barriers whenever we can. And something we're doing on a wider scale now is trying to talk to other organisations about how they can do that. So sharing best practice in our sector and making sure that we're working together really in this. At the end of the day, this is all about helping people. And if there's things that we can share to do that well, then great. And a big part of doing things well is partnering with key organisations to create support. We're very much in favour of active referrals and warm handovers to organisations to make things simpler, rather than just giving out a number, for example. And what we will do is we'll make sure that if we can get them to a support service that specialises in a particular vulnerability, we do that as quickly as we can and as effectively as we can as well. This just gives you a little bit of an idea of clients that are with PayPlan and those clients that do have vulnerabilities. As you can see, there is a wide range of vulnerabilities affecting different people that are in debt. If we can see they're affecting both males and females, affecting different marital statuses, different demographics in terms of maybe job roles, and this can affect anybody at any time. And one thing that is also certainly in the forefront of our minds when we're speaking to somebody is that there is often more than one vulnerability that a client might be struggling with. And it might be that they've talked about one particular vulnerability, but we need to be able to recognize the signs of maybe others as well and how we can support those. So 63% of clients that contact us have 2 or more vulnerabilities that they might be struggling with. And mental health issues and conditions are certainly, we're finding, are very much linked to debt and struggling with finances. We recently did a study, actually, so this was last year, regarding the link between debt and the impact on mental health. And I've just got this here to show you. So it actually showed that being in debt causes 91% of the clients in this study to be stressed, which is understandable, as you can imagine. 68% struggling with depression and 84% struggling with anxiety. And 47% of those people have approached their doctor with regards to stress or mental health, and 37% of those were recommended to seek debt advice as a way to handle that. And what we're trying to do is look to see how we can increase that, because the quicker that we can get somebody assistance, the better. And out of those clients, those that were most worried, they said that 88% of people were not able to pay their bills, and that was a real concern for them. 45% were worried about losing their car or their home. And again, getting good advice can prevent all of that. We can look at options to safeguard somebody's home and their assets wherever we can. 39% of people saying that they have no one to talk to. And again, that's where we can come in. And we appreciate we're not a friend or a family member, but often we're maybe the only person that somebody can speak to about this particular situation. And for us, that's a really important role that we can play in that person's life. So how can we make advice as accessible as possible and as friendly as possible so that somebody feels comfortable? And 30% have said that the debt is affecting their performance at work. And what was interesting was really for us to concentrate on what is the impact of getting debt help? What help can intervention bring to somebody? And it showed that 93% of those people improved their mental well-being and stress levels were reduced once they've got debt help. 73% of people found the online journey good for them. So they felt that relieved some pressure because they had different ways that they could get help rather than just one route to getting advice. 95% of people felt confident about managing money because of the advice that they had. And that's great, because a big part of what we want to do is empower people. And then 69% of people felt that they could then open up to friends and family. So because they had a plan perhaps, and because we'd given them all the information that they needed, that then allowed them to have better communication with those that are around them. And then we're not the only person that they have to speak about this. They have a network of people that can support them. So that was very useful for us to conduct with our clients. A big part of what we want to do here is to make sure that we're helping people in the best way. So certainly from us, one of our ethos is that debt advice is at its best if a client is effectively engaged, and that's part of why we offer so many different ways for clients to communicate with us, and why it's so nice to hear that Care First look at ways to warmly hand a client into PayPlan, whether that might be, like you said, in one seamless phone call. That is a really nice, engaging way for somebody to be introduced to PayPlan. They are given a recommendation. That's something that we will do here. Somebody goes through a full debt advice appointment to explore the solutions available to them. We will recommend, we'll talk to them about all of the options that are available, but we'll give them a recommendation of which one is best for them given their situation. So they'll get very tailored advice. And the advice we give them is flexible and it's personal to them. And that's something we really work hard at, to make sure that every single person that comes to us feels like they're an individual and they're getting dedicated help. And we do that by breaking down barriers of seeking debt help. Some of that's the different tools that we offer and different ways people communicate, to the way that we speak to people as well. We give that tailored support and advice whenever a client might need it. We deliver simple ways to interact with our services, but also we try to really work hard to do away with jargon, to present information in simple ways that people can understand. Because debt advice is quite complex, it's quite complicated, it can be a little bit of a minefield, and whatever we can do to make that simpler, then great. And also building trust and supporting clients throughout their time with us. So ensuring that they know that their information is safe, what they say to us is in confidence, and that we're here to help them, we're on their side. And one thing that we also want to make sure is that we're doing whatever we can to work with an organisation that wants to refer clients into PayPlan and to use our services. And one thing that we want to make sure is that we're working really closely with Care First to ensure we provide the best advice and support we can. We're offering a range of ways that you can interact with our services. So that might be through the warm handovers that you do. I think that's one of the most effective ways to introduce somebody to debt help. It might be that we can provide you with other tools, such as access to our portal that you can refer clients through via as well. Leaflets that can be provided digitally or in person to people perhaps as well. And then we adapt around our clients. And I said right in the early stages of my chat, it's really important that we're taking things at a pace that works for that individual. And for some, that might mean talking to us at several points. Maybe it means that they can only work with us for a few minutes today and then a few minutes tomorrow. And we'll take it at their pace. And what's important is that we will get them there at the time that is right for them, and that it works around their particular needs. And that at all times, if there's anything we can do to make things easier, to make things simpler, we're here to talk. So, you know, whatever that might be, whatever we can offer to make things more effective, then we can have a discussion at any time. And that's everything from us.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anthony, for that. That's
no problem.
It's an amazing service that you offer, undoubtedly, and to hear both of you talk about the way that you support the people that call into Care First, and I'm sure tens of thousands of other people across the country is so welcomed. You know, I know that the experiences that people can have if they do have debt, and no matter if it's, you know, a few thousand up to tens and hundreds of thousands, you know, people feel that their debt is worse than anybody else's, and the reality is
very unique, isn't it?
Yeah, but the reality is that people are experiencing debt across the country,
Yes.
and they will continue to do that, even maybe more now than ever, with the pandemic situation that we're currently in. So good to hear how people can use your services. I would recommend everybody that has listened to today and that watches this video, so if you are watching on a video, please feel free to contact Care First. The telephone number to contact us is the one that's available from your organisation. If you don't have that, then please feel free to contact Care First on the email address that is info@care-first.co.uk. Or if you do have the free phone number, please feel free to call us and we will be able to support you either by giving some advice or referring you, as Anthony's just said, directly into PayPlan. Anthony and Alistair, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Real pleasure.
I've had a question if your slides will be available. So if you could possibly send me the slides that you've used today, I'll make sure Absolutely. That they are on the LinkedIn at the Care First lifestyle page for people to access if they need it as well. So if you could do that, that would be great. Thank you for your time. Have a lovely weekend, and for everybody listening as well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.